The Good Wife. In a quiet village nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, there lived a humble man named Thomas and his wife, Eleanor. They had been married for 10 years, and their love for one another had grown with each passing day. Their home was a simple cottage, but it was filled with warmth and joy. Though they were not wealthy in gold or possessions, they had all they needed: a small vegetable garden, a few chickens, and each other's company. Eleanor was known throughout the village as the Good Wife. She was kind, gentle, and hardworking. She was always the first to help a neighbor in need, whether that meant cooking for a sick family or lending an ear to someone burdened by worries. Thomas often boasted that he had married the most generous and loving woman in the world. Indeed, it seemed to everyone in the village that they were a perfect match. But life has its way of testing the strongest bonds, and even in their peaceful village, hardship found its way to their door. One year, the crops failed. A drought had swept across the land, leaving the fields dry and barren. The village's once lush, green landscape had turned brown, and food became scarce. Families began to worry about how they would survive the winter, and Thomas and Eleanor were no exception. Though they had always managed with little, this time was different. Their garden, usually brimming with vegetables, yielded almost nothing. The chickens stopped laying eggs, and they had no money to buy food from the market. Thomas worked as a woodcutter, but even the forests seemed to suffer from the drought. Trees were dry and brittle, and work became harder. They sold what little they had to get by, but the winter was fast approaching, and there was no sign of relief. One evening, as Thomas sat by the fire, his head heavy with worry, Eleanor approached him with her ever-present calm demeanor. "Thomas," she said softly, "we will get through this, just as we always have." "I don't know how," Thomas replied, his voice full of despair. "I can't bear the thought of seeing you go hungry." Eleanor knelt beside him and took his hands in hers. "We will be fine. We have each other, and that is more than enough. Remember, hard times don't last forever." Her words brought him some comfort, but the days continued to grow colder, and their pantry emptier. As the first snowfall of winter covered the village in a blanket of white, Thomas knew they had no choice but to seek help. Reluctantly, he went to the wealthiest man in the village, Sir Reginald, a stern man known for his wealth but not his generosity. Sir Reginald lived in a grand house at the top of the hill, where he kept to himself and rarely interacted with the villagers. But Thomas, desperate to provide for his wife, swallowed his pride and knocked on the great wooden door. Sir Reginald answered, his expression as cold as the winter wind. "What is it you want?" he asked, not bothering to hide his irritation. "Sir Reginald, I humbly ask for your help," Thomas began. "My wife and I have fallen on hard times due to the drought. We have no food for the winter, and I fear for her health. If you could spare just a little, we would be forever grateful." The wealthy man narrowed his eyes. "And why should I help you? What have you done for me?" Thomas felt a surge of anger but quickly suppressed it. "I know I have nothing to offer you now, but I will repay you. I will work for you, day and night, to earn back whatever you give us." Sir Reginald considered this for a moment. Then, a cruel smile crept across his face. "Very well," he said. "I will help you. But there is a condition." "Anything," Thomas replied quickly. Sir Reginald leaned forward. "I will provide food and firewood for you and your wife throughout the winter. But in return, you must give me something valuable." Thomas's heart sank. They had nothing of value to give. "What do you want?" he asked, dreading the answer. Sir Reginald's eyes gleamed. "Your wife." Thomas recoiled, horrified. "What do you mean?" "Your wife, Eleanor, is known throughout the village as a woman of great virtue," Sir Reginald said. "If you agree, she will come to work in my house, as my servant, for the entire winter. At the end of the season, I will release her and forgive your debt." Thomas was speechless. The idea of sending Eleanor to work for such a man was unthinkable. Yet, without Sir Reginald's help, they would surely starve. "I can't do that," Thomas whispered. "Then you and your wife will freeze and starve," Sir Reginald replied with a shrug. "The choice is yours." Thomas left the house, his mind in turmoil. How could he ask Eleanor to do such a thing? Yet, as he trudged back to their cottage, he knew he had no other choice. That night, he told Eleanor of Sir Reginald's proposition. To his surprise, Eleanor did not react with anger or sorrow. Instead, she smiled softly and said, "If this is what we must do to survive, then I will go. We have faced worse together, and we will face this too. But promise me, Thomas, that you will never stop believing in better days." Reluctantly, Thomas agreed. The next morning, Eleanor packed a small bag and walked up the hill to Sir Reginald's mansion. For the next few months, she worked as a servant, scrubbing floors, cleaning dishes, and performing every menial task Sir Reginald commanded. Though her body ached, her spirit remained strong. Sir Reginald had hoped to break her, but no matter how harsh his orders or how demeaning his tasks, Eleanor never complained. She did her work with grace, always remembering that she was doing this for Thomas and for their future. The winter dragged on, but slowly, the snow began to melt. The first signs of spring appeared in the form of tiny green shoots poking through the ground. With the change of season came new hope. One day, Sir Reginald called Eleanor to his study. "The winter is over," he said, his voice cold as ever. "You are free to go." Eleanor thanked him and left the mansion without looking back. When she returned to the cottage, Thomas greeted her with open arms. He had worked tirelessly all winter to prepare their home for her return, and though they still had little, they had each other. In the years that followed, the village recovered from the drought, and Thomas and Eleanor rebuilt their lives. They never forgot the harsh winter they had endured, but their love had grown even stronger through the trial. Eleanor's kindness and strength had not only saved their lives but had taught them the true value of love, sacrifice, and resilience.